නව ටොමෙක්ස් පැල්ලම් සහ විසබීජ අවම කර දින 3ක් දක්වා ටොයිලට් එක ෆ්‍රෙෂ්ව තමයි. ටොමෙක්ස්.
Tonight, perfect timing. As shortages in essentials continue to plague the island, the World Bank steps up with $10 million for drug purchases. No can do. Occupy Golface continues for the 5th day as protesters spurn the Prime Minister's offer of talks. One Direction. The JVP-led Jatika Janabalavegya pledges to provide a political path to the citizens' protests with a mega march next Sunday. An early warning. Coconut growers raise the red flag over the effect of a continued shortage of chemical fertilizer.
In 2023, we will start to see the decline. By 2024, there will be a 50% drop. By 2025, we will need to import nuts.
All this and much more coming up tonight on First at 9, this Wednesday, the 13th of April, 2022.
Fair and Lovely men's වල අලුත් නම දැන් Glow and Handsome.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
And a warm welcome. You're joining us on AdaDerana English News, and I'm Indivri Amwatha. It has been 2 weeks since protests have erupted across the country demanding an end to shortages and the resignation of the government. The biggest protest so far has been the mass gathering of the public at Golface Green, which has gone on for the 5th straight day. Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa today called for talks with the protesters, where he offered to listen to their demands and complaints. However, the invitation to the talks has been given the cold shoulder by the protesters, who say that they have only one demand. That is for the current leadership to step down.
Since the mass gathering on the 9th of this month at Golface Green, the persistence of the protesters has exceeded the expectations of many. What was initially thought to be a traditional Sri Lankan protest that lasts for a couple of hours at most has turned out to be a beacon for thousands of young and old for the past 5 days straight. And throughout the past 5 days, they have stayed where they were, namely outside the Presidential Secretariat and on Golface Green that now resembles a campsite. The camp's residents have also given it a name, one that clearly displays what their main demand is. Despite the heavy rains, protesters continue to voice their slogans, hold up their placards, and also help distribute food and water to their fellow protesters. The campsite also has its own medical tent. These efforts have been supported by streams of donors, dropping off whatever is needed to sustain the struggle. To add to this, just as it was in the day before, artists and musicians continue to entertain the protesters at the location today. Some protesters created their own seasonal entertainment with the holding of traditional Aurudu games as well. Meanwhile, protesters also lined up to place their signatures on a giant banner that has been set up to collect signatures on a petition calling for the resignation of the president. With what was witnessed today, we could safely say that for all intents and purposes, the protesters seem to be prepared to stretch their struggle into a 6th day as well. In the meantime, After 5 days of continuous protests, Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa announced today that the government is willing to hold discussions with the protesters and listen to their complaints. Taking to Twitter, the Premier stated that understanding that this is a tough time for all Sri Lankans, he invites the youth to meet and discuss any possible, plausible courses of action for the sake of Sri Lanka. In response, however, the protesters have point-blank declined the Premier's invitation, stating that they only have one demand, that is for the President and the government to resign. Meanwhile, other anti-government protests were also held in other parts of the country as well. As it has been the case in the past 5 days or more protests were held by Sri Lankans residing overseas.
The Jatika Jana Balawegya plans to march from Beruwala to Colombo to bring about new life to the Goldface protests, says General Secretary Tilvin Silva. This is set to take place on the 17th of this month, with the party pledging to gather the country's largest crowd of protesters and provide a proper political path to the current citizens' protests.
ඇත්ත වශයෙන්ම මේ මොහොතේ මේ දියත් වෙලා තියෙන ජනතා අරගලය ඔවුන් තේරුම් ගැනීමට බැරි වෙලා තියෙනවද කියන එක තමයි මෙතනින් ප්‍රධාන වශයෙන් පෙන්눔 කරන්නේ. ඒ අරගලය පොඩ්ඩක් අවධානයෙන් බැලුවොත් වර්ධනය වෙච්ච විදිය, ඒක ආරම්භ වෙච්ච විදිය, ඉල්ලීම් මොනවද, ඒකේ කවුද ඉන්නේ, බුද්ධිමත් අධ්‍යයනයක යෙදුණා නම් ආණ්ඩුවට තේරෙයි ජනතාව කොතනද ඉන්නේ කියලා.
ආණ්ඩුව උත්සාහ කරමින් ඉන්නවා මේ අරගලය විවිධ ආකාරයෙන් මොට කරන්න. ආණ්ඩුව මුලින් උත්සාහ කරා මේ අරගලය නොසලකා යන්න. Don't care ඊට ගණන් ගත්තේ නැහැ. ඊට පස්සේ උත්සාහ කරා මේ අරගලේ බියවත් දාන්න. අම්මලා තාත්තලාට කිව්වා දරුවෝ පරිස්සම් කරගන්න කියලා. මේකට අවලාද මඩ ගහන්න පටන් ගත්තා තමන්ගේ ඔය හිංචයියෝ දාලා. ඊට පස්සේ උත්සාහ කරා මේකට ජාතිවාදේ පටලවා. ඒ ඔක්කොම උත්සාහ කළා සාතු වුණාම දැන් ලෑස්ති වෙනවා අර කොක්කෙන් බැරනම් එක්කෙන් වගේ තමයි සාකච්ඡා කරන්න කියලා. අපි කියන්නේ ආණ්ඩුවට මේ අරගලේ නියැලෙන කායෙක්වත් ආණ්ඩුවට සාකච්ඡා කරලා කරන්න පුළුවන් දෙයක් නැහැ. සටන් බිමේ ඉන්නේ ඕගොල්ලන්ගේ පාර්ලිමේන්තුවේ ඕගොල්ලන්ගේ පක්ෂවල ඉන්න ජාති මිනිස්සු නෙවෙයි. මේ සටන් බිමේ ඉන්නේ අවංකව අරගලට ආපු මිනිස්සු. ජනාධිපතිවරු ඉවත් වෙන තුරු මේ සටන මොනම හේතුවක් නිසාවත් අපි නතර කරන්නේ නැහැ, නතර වෙන්න ඉඩ දෙන්නෙත් නැහැ. අපි ජාතික ජන බලවේගය හැටියට තීන්දුව කරලා තියෙනවා මේ සටනට නව ජවයක් දෙන්න. මේ මාසේ 17 18 19 කින් දවස් තුනේ දෙවන්ත පාගමනක් යොදාගෙන තියෙනවා. මේ පාගමන පටන් ගන්නවා කළුතර දිස්ත්‍රික්කයේ බේරුවල නගරෙන් 17 වෙනිදා උදේ 9ට කොළඹ දක්වා මේ පාගමන එනකොට අපි විශ්වාස කරනවා අපේ රටේ ඉතිහාසයේ එකතු වෙච්ච විශාලම ජන කණ්ඩායම එකතු කරන්න පුළුවන් කියලා. මේ අරගලේ ජයග්‍රහී ලෙස නිමා කරන්න පුළුවන් ජනතා බලයක් බවට පත් කිරීමට අපි ලෑස්ති. ප්‍රශ්නේ දේශපාලනිකයි, උත්තරේ දේශපාලනිකයි, නිසා අරගලේ දේශපාලනිකයි. පැහැදිලිවම මේ අරගලයට දේශපාලනික මඟ පෙන්වීම කරන්න. මේ අරගලේ හොදකලා නොවි රැක ගන්න. මේ අරගලේ ජයග්‍රහණයෙන් කෙලවර කිරීම සඳහා වෙච්ච මැදිහත් වීම කරන්න ජාතික ජන බලවේගය ලෑස්ති.
Now, Sri Lanka's protests have continued unabated for the past 2 weeks or more, and so far no solution seems to be on the way. With talks having been rejected by protesters, it's anyone's guess as to how this crisis will be handled. With us tonight is Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna parliamentarian Suren Raghavan to help us understand what the next steps will be. A very warm welcome to you. Parliamentarian, I think now there have been calls for a national government, but there doesn't seem any positive response from your opposition parties. But at the same time, the JVP-led NPP wants to give a political identity or leadership to the mass citizens' protests, while the SGV calls for a change of the executive. Talks are inconclusive between the government and other parties, be it independent, your same parliamentarians. Where are we heading in terms of parliament?
Yeah, I think as a political scientist, it's a very interesting phenomena that is unfolding in Sri Lanka. But as a citizen, first of all, I'm very concerned and sad that the dialogical democracy has been not given priority. For instance, we were writing to President for the last 1.5 years, and then when we became independent, we were very clear with the President, the 10 points that we presented to him and to Prime Minister, and then we went on arguing, saying that this economic crisis has now moved to socio-political arena. So economic crisis, we need $10 billion ideally, but $5 billion at least. But to do that, we need a stable government, we need a stable society, even IMF to consider us as a recipient. But President and Prime Minister and the governmental thinking had been more governmental than state-oriented. Because the government is a caretaker of a state of a country. Now, this government is also a caretaker of the state of Sri Lanka. So therefore, when it comes to these crises, we must put party aside, politics aside, and look into Sri Lanka's direction. But unfortunately, very unfortunately, President and Prime Minister have been taking intransigent positions, even sometimes disgracing our own dialogue by appointing. I mean, politicians are always power hungry, right? And they can go and switch camps. But it is up to the president who sworn in one of our members as a deputy minister while we were talking to him. And I think that was a backstab, totally unacceptable to us. So we have very clearly told that we will stop, we will halt all the discussions. Though we believe in dialogical democracy and the way forward.
Are you washing your hands off this?
No,
because
definitely not.
You have been a part of this government.
Yes,
and just a couple of days when people walk to the streets expressing their opposition to the entirety of the Podujana Peramuna-led government, you decide to be independent. But are you considering this as a responsible move when Sri Lanka is facing the worst economic crisis?
There is frontline and behind the curtain situations in politics. Behind the curtain last 1.5 years. Personally, before even Gotabaya Rajapaksa president took office, when I was governor of the Northern Province, met him a number of times and told him his victory is assured because the political current was that. But what he has to deal with is the economy. And economic crisis will be, this is well before Corona. And I'm no economist in any sense, right? But my political reading was that Sri Lanka was heading for a, so last time when we met, and I think I met President and Prime President particularly last 5-6 days, about 4 or 5 times on our discussions. But last time, surprisingly, President told that until the last day that PB Jayasundara was leaving, he wasn't aware the full scale situation of Sri Lankan economy. And that, I think, is eye-opener, and I wouldn't accept that at all.
Minister Ali Sabri has been appointed to oversee finances.
Yeah.
A new central bank governor, former deputy governor Dr. Nandalal Veerasinghe is appointed, and IMF spring meetings are happening. We will be happening. We have the finance minister preparing a program to go to the IMF.
11th we were to have, but it postponed again.
Yes, but don't you see that finally they are in the right move? But shouldn't the independent group be a part of this entire
yes, we are willing. Absolutely, we are willing. This is the direction to go, but 1.5 years ago we've been telling government for its own, PB Jayasundara, Article, Cabral, you name them. The entire team, according to what President says now, were telling not to go to IMF. And there are other repercussions going to IMF. So today we are in the 4th category of IMF classing states. So now our the negotiations will be definitely difficult.
What are you telling the government to do now?
We have been telling the economic crisis is an internal, external factor. But the political and social and parliamentary crisis is an internal factor. We can solve that inside. The President wanted to sack the cabinet or resign the cabinet. That happened immediately. And he appointed 4 more ministers. That happened immediately. So why doesn't the government think that there is a political crisis right now and they must sit down and negotiate and honestly discuss and have a stable government before we go into IMF even?
What's the face of the stable government that you're talking about?
We have said interim government is the first step. Because SJB's position of impeaching the president is a long drawn process. It's constitutional, it's legal, Supreme Court, Speaker, and all of them are involved. What we are suggesting is let's have an interim government.
A national government, does that mean?
Okay, there are 2 definitions of national government and interim government. Interim government is one that will be transit to the next position, national government with all the parties.
So does that interim government, are you expecting all parties to?
All parties to come, ideally. If Podujana Peramuna does not want to be part of it, Prime Minister can resign, step down, and 113 votes for any member who is in the parliament can form. And this is what our line had been. I respect Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa for what he had done to this country. In fact, I was on a research paper about his life and political career, right? But he had been 3 times president, 2 times president, 4 times prime minister. He, as a leader, can take this discussion to a different direction, a positive direction. But we don't see that. We don't see that. So what we are saying now is that please don't throw this final straw that we have about coming together. An interim government until next election can put ourselves up in the parliament and society.
But will this help this political crisis and economic crisis? It's
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. The political crisis is a baby of the economic crisis, right? If we had electricity, if we had fuel, if we had medicine, if we had gas, people wouldn't have come to street. Right? It would have been kind of an intellectual, academic discussion of change in the government. But people came out actually when the hard message came to their home, a hard message hit their kitchens, hard message hit their bedrooms without ACs, then people came. I mean, the present crisis. But don't forget, last 1.5 years, the peripheral farmers have been protesting about the fertilizer crisis that we had, the infectious crisis we had, the change of the facilities that the farmers were not getting. But we didn't hear that. The suburban middle class did not hear or decided to ignore that until hard darkness came to their home.
We see this as also a manifestation of inconsistent policies over years and decades.
Yes.
But now is there a political will from your observation of Parliament to finally address this situation, to come together?
Absolutely.
Because we see the government in one direction, the main opposition talking about something else, and then the northern parties in a different direction.
At least they are silent, and I don't know what they're saying, even their voice is not heard.
Yes, but is there finally a political will? Because
be fair by them, since you talked about northern parties,
people are rejecting all 225.
Well, that's kind of an anarchist state, and I don't think as a democracy we should go. Yes, there is a political trust breaking. People do not want to see people want results, not just institutional talk shops, our parliament. Even last 4 days of the debate, if you look at our parliament's debates, did not take us to solutions, but it was blaming each other. So right now, 21st century's politics are politics of the Generation Z. This hashtag GHG need to be heard of. And the voice of the street is only a symbol of the deep down crisis that we have. So I really pray, right now that's all we can do, it seems to be, that government will change heart and Prime Minister or President will make a sacrifice and leave room for an interim government so that Parliament can be stable, and then we can go to our lenders saying, right, now we have at least a government, let us talk.
I think people expect you parliamentarians as well to push the government and the opposition to come together.
I just came from a meeting and I'm going for a meeting. We have had so many meetings, and thank you so much for having this weave. I appeal to all our concerned citizens that push the government for a win-win situation, which is an interim government until we are stable and we get our basics done, and then we can talk about politics.
Thank you very much for your time here. We had with us parliamentarian Suren Raghavan joining us on AdaDerana English News Live now. We'll see you again on the other side of this break. Do stay with us.
Big 3.
Now, with fuel queues continuing to inconvenience day-to-day life in the island, the Ceylon Petroleum Corporation announced that 40,000 metric tons of diesel is due to arrive at the Colombo port tomorrow. The CPC is once again warning the public to stop queuing at filling stations to panic buy fuel, as sufficient stocks are available in the country. However, the message among the public is that words alone may not be enough to ease their fears.
Under the $1 billion line of credit extended by India to purchase essential goods, a consignment of 11,000 metric tons of rice arrived at the Colombo port yesterday. In addition to today's consignment, a total of 5,000 metric tons of rice had been received in the past few days under this facility. With this, a total of 16,000 metric tons of rice out of 40,000 metric tons to be imported by the State Trading Corporation of India have arrived in Sri Lanka by now. As per the $500 million Indian line of credit to purchase petroleum products, another shipment of 40,000 metric tons of diesel are expected to arrive in Sri Lanka tomorrow. With all these measures, the Ceylon Petroleum Corporation says that the public should not queue up at filling stations, as sufficient fuel is available in adequate quantities. Despite this, however, large queues for diesel still continues near refueling stations. And now, queues seem to be forming for petrol as well. Meanwhile, police raids to arrest fuel black marketeers are currently underway. A total of 67 raids have been conducted in the past 24 hours and have led to the seizure of 10,115 litres of diesel, 5,690 litres of petrol and 5,620 litres of kerosene. According to police, 135 raids had been conducted so far in search of unauthorised fuel sellers. Police media spokesperson SSP Nihal Talduwa said that legal action would be sought against any individuals apprehended in the raids. He also urged members of the public to make sure to purchase fuel from licensed sellers. Meanwhile, despite gas queues forming at Litro gas outlets, the company has decided to keep its storage terminal in Kerawalapitia closed for a period of 5 days from today until the 17th of April in view of the Sinhala and Tamil New Year. This will also bring the island-wide distribution process to a temporary standstill during this period.
Now, Sri Lanka has received $10 million in emergency funding from the World Bank to purchase medicinal drugs. Finance Minister Ali Sabri announced yesterday that this amount had been agreed to by the World Bank and that its arrival would bring about some relief to the current shortages, especially at state hospitals. Now, quoting the Health Ministry in a statement, the Government Information Department revealed that ministerial officials are currently in talks with the World Health Organization and the Asian Development Bank as well for assistance in procuring the necessary drugs. In addition, it has been reported that letters of credit are being opened for the importation of medical drugs and equipment from India under the Indian credit line. The Health Ministry also says that requests made to foreign institutions and Sri Lankan expatriates for donations of pharmaceuticals or cash has so far received a positive response. Minister of Finance Ali Sabri extended the import restrictions on 367 non-essential goods into the country via an extraordinary gazette today. According to the gazette, anyone who wishes to import the goods specified in the gazette are required to obtain a valid license from the Controller General of Imports and Exports Control.
The government today extended the import restrictions imposed on 367 non-essential goods into Sri Lanka without a valid license. Issuing an extraordinary gazette, Minister of Finance Ali Sabri extended the former gazette notification brought into effect on the 10th of last month. The regulations prescribed in the gazette are only applicable to the importation of goods which have a date of bill of lading or airway bill on or after the 10th of April. Licenses to import the specified non-essential items will be issued after being subjected to the recommendation of the Secretary to the Ministry of Finance. Any person wishing to import the specified goods are required to be in possession of a valid license issued by the Controller General of Imports and Exports Control prior to the date of bill of lading, airway bill or such importation. Under the import restriction, food items such as apples, butter, dates, oranges, curd, yogurt, chocolates and pasta are included, along with items such as liquor, cigarettes, perfume, cosmetic items, and domestic electric appliances also making the list.
Now, the Sri Lanka Navy, in a joint operation with the State Intelligence Service and the Police Narcotics Bureau, have prevented a shipment of 330 kilograms of heroin and 9 kilograms of crystal meth from reaching Sri Lankan streets. The haul was seized from a local multi-day fishing vessel intercepted in the southern waters of the island after a 2-week search operation. The street value of the consignment has been estimated at over 6.7 billion rupees.
A special operation by the Sri Lankan Navy in coordination with the Sri Lanka Coast Guard, State Intelligence Service and the Police Narcotic Bureau in the southern waters of the island has netted a local multi-day fishing vessel carrying narcotics believed to be heroin and crystal methamphetamine. The Sri Lanka Navy and the Coast Guard had been conducting a 2-week-long operation covering both local and international seas based on precise information received from the State Intelligence Service. Accordingly, the Navy had intercepted and searched a suspicious local fishing trawler in the seas off Dodanduwa last evening. The interception led to the recovery of 330 kilograms of heroin and 9 kilograms of crystal methamphetamine, that was taken into custody during the operation. According to Navy officials, the gross street value of the consignment of narcotics is believed to be over 6.7 billion rupees. Further, 11 suspects were arrested while their fishing vessel, a dinghy, a double cab and a three-wheeler were also seized. The suspects were identified as residents of Hikkaduwa, Bussa, Kalawana, Berilavatta and Morogoda areas, aged between 23 and 36 years. According to the Navy, the fishing vessel had left the Beruala Fisheries Harbour on the 26th of March under the guise of conducting fishing activities.
Now, the Department of Meteorology expects the existing heavy showery conditions over the island to reduce to some extent from tomorrow. According to the forecast issued for tomorrow, showers or thunder showers are expected to occur at several places in the western and southern coastal areas during the morning hours. Further, early heavy showers about 75 millimeters can be expected in some places in the central, Uva and Sabaragamu provinces as well as the Polonnaruwa and Ampara districts. According to the Met Department, heavy rains will enhance again on the 18th of April. Welcome back. The continued foreign exchange shortage that has expected and affected importation of fertilizer is bound to lead a major shortage of coconuts by next year, says the Coconut Growers Association. Now, the shortage of fertilizer threatens to scuttle the developments of up to 4 million new saplings planted last year to increase annual yields, which the association says will have a snowball effect in the years ahead.
Coconuts play a huge part in Sri Lanka's agricultural output, accounting for around 12% of produce. Coconut plantations make up a total of 443,528 hectares of Sri Lanka's land, out of which 3 billion nuts are produced annually. According to the Coconut Development Authority, Sri Lankans consume nearly 1.75 to 2 billion coconuts per year, while the balance harvest is used to produce a range of products, including for export. In 2021, coconut output stood at 3.3 billion nuts, which was a 500 million increase compared to the year 2020. This was possible due to efforts of the Plantation Ministry to increase coconut output by 3.6 billion every year, and this included the planting of 4 million saplings across the island in July 2021. However, it now seems that last April's chemical fertilizer ban is about to have a major effect on these saplings. According to coconut growers, there is an urgent need for chemical fertilizer to prevent this right now. Despite some concessions provided last November to the private sector, allowing import of chemical fertilizer to meet their demands, the problem right now is that there is no fertilizer available. The reason being the country's foreign exchange crisis. The Coconut Growers Association says that the shortage of fertilizer could lead to forestation of coconut estates, as coconut plants need at least 2 to 3 years after fertilizer use to begin producing nuts. This means the industry is staring down the barrel of an imminent shortage.
The coconut tree takes 3 years to produce a mature nut. If there is no fertilizer, it takes 3 years to the effect to be seen in the nut production. So it starts by a 50% drop after 3 years. So 2021, we did not get any fertilizer. So 2022, still fertilizer is not available. There is doubt whether it will be imported. And 2022, we will still get a good crop. In 2023, we will start to see the decline. In some estates which are less fertile, you can see the decline. But by 2024, there will be a 50% drop in all estates. And by 2025, this will continue. So by 2025, we will need to import nuts. Our average production is 3 billion, which about 70% goes for domestic consumption. We will have to import 250 million nuts to supply the domestic demand.
Professor Matthew warns that if things go the way they are right now, we could be looking at a very long-term problem.
The fertilizer requirement is only 80,000 tons per year. The important thing is after next year, even if you apply fertilizer, the effect will take another 2 years. So the drop in production will continue. So this is a critical year for the coconut industry. If we don't get fertilizer, we are going to have a severe effect on the production, and most of the coconut estate owners will start cutting the trees and selling it for firewood to sustain themselves.
With Sri Lanka being the 4th largest exporter of coconut products in the world, and generating an annual income of over $836 million, Sri Lanka can hardly afford to lose out. With Sri Lanka's desiccated coconut, virgin coconut oil, and coconut water world renowned for quality and purity, the sector's plans to break the $1 billion mark seems to be at risk of failing. This is the fear of the country's manufacturers of coconut-related products.
Due to the government's decision of not importing fertilizer, going organic, coconut industry has really suffered a lot. Just like the tea industry, although tea industry is immediate repercussions, coconut industry will start suffering, crops will reduce drastically by end of this year. Therefore, it's a huge issue not importing fertilizer for coconut industry, MOP as well as urea. Therefore, there will be about 50 to 60% shortage in the crop because there is no fertilizer that has been promised. The industry, I don't see the future because not only the fertilizer, because of the shortage of power and also shortage of fuel, we are unable to function the factories because we are manufacturing a food product which will be directly consumed by the end user. If there is a power shortages or drops or cuts, we cannot manufacture hygienic top quality coconut which we have been getting a premium price for Sri Lanka. Therefore, we have already during the last few months lost the world market. In the future, we will be losing it further because of the depreciation of our rupee. Therefore, the industry, the exporters sold desiccated coconut and the coconut products which are exported at those prices, and we are unable to get the benefit, although we get double the price in rupee terms because of the high price of fuel and non-availability of electricity to manufacture in our plants. So we have lost orders which are already committed.
Ratings agency FITCH has placed 13 Sri Lankan banks on rating watch negative due to what it says are heightened near-term downside risks stemming from constrained access to foreign currency fundings. It adds that the negative outlook on the score reflects the country's weakening sovereign credit profile as well.
Fitch Ratings has placed the national long-term ratings of 13 Sri Lankan banks on rating watch negative. In its rationale, Fitch says that this reflects heightened near-term downside risk stemming from constrained access to foreign currency funding and the resulting indicators of stress experienced by the banks in the system. It adds that the risk is exacerbated by the sovereign credit profile, long-term local currency, and the ensuring risk of the stability of the financial system. Fitch says that it believes that mounting currency stress will increase the likelihood of restrictions being imposed on the bank's ability to service their obligations in foreign currency and local currency in the event of a sovereign default. Fitch also believes that domestic banks' foreign currency funding and liquidity positions are prone to sudden changes amid already weak creditor sentiment. It also observes that Sri Lanka's operating environment remains challenging and its negative outlook on the score reflects a significant near to mid-term downside risk presented by the weakening sovereign credit profile. Fitch says that it aims to resolve the rating watch negative in the next 6 months depending on the evolution of the bank's funding and liquidity positions.
Taking you to international news, a mass shooting broke out in a New York City subway train last morning, resulting in 10 people receiving gunshot wounds and leaving at least another 20 victims with other injuries. A massive manhunt has been launched to apprehend the suspect, whose motive is yet to be uncovered.
Multiple people shot and nearly 24 people were injured by a mass shooting incident in a crowded New York City subway train during the early morning rush hour yesterday. The incident occurred yesterday during the morning commute at the 36th Street subway station in Brooklyn's Sunset Park neighborhood. According to foreign media, 10 victims were hit by gunfire, with 5 listed in critical but stable condition, while others suffered from smoke inhalation and other related injuries. According to officials, the shooter, who is yet to be apprehended, was wearing a neon orange and green construction vest and a neon green helmet on a Manhattan-bound train, setting off smoke bombs and opening fire just before 8:30 a.m. As a crowded subway car filled with smoke, the shooter took out a 9mm semi-automatic gun and fired 33 rounds at commuters, hitting 10 victims and leaving at least 19 others wounded. Those hurt include 2 teenagers and an expectant mother, according to law enforcement services. The incident came just a day after President Biden announced a new gun control measures increasing restriction on ghost guns, the difficult-to-trace weapons that can be assembled at home. However, the reason behind the mass shooting is yet to be uncovered, and a manhunt is underway to arrest the suspect.
That wraps up tonight's edition of First at 9, your AdaDerana English Primetime Bulletin. Have a pleasant evening. Good night.